All right, listeners, paper number 3 for the month of September. This is going to be fast. It is going to be a quick hit. However, we want to leave you something clinical that you can apply today if you are driving into your shift and listening to us. So we all know that V-fib is a problem, and shocking patients out of it can be very difficult. Over the past decade, we have talked increasingly about double or dual sequential defibrillation. It depends on which way you like to define how it's happening. But this is the concept of taking 2 defibrillators as opposed to 1, applying the pads so that they are not directly overlapping, and shocking near simultaneously from different vectors into the heart to convert back to a non-ventricular fibrillation rhythm. There was a great paper, the DOSE-VF trial, that looked exactly at this and said that dual or double sequential defibrillation is better for refractory V-fib, defined as a patient who went through at least 3 standard defibrillations and still was in a persistent ventricular fibrillation rhythm. Well, they took a look at this study even closer and asked the question, can we also apply this to recurrent ventricular fibrillation? So the patient who maybe converts out but then reconverts and still is in a somewhat persistent, although we'll call it paroxysmal ventricular fibrillation. Cam, what's your take?
I just love the fact that you defined paroxysmal VF. I've never heard that before, and that's exactly what we're talking about here. So brilliant. I have loved the idea behind this for so long. I think when I first read about it, it was like, this is just the kind of crazy thing that we need in emergency medicine. Like, more electricity is more better, and we might as well send it from more vectors. I've been a huge fan of this, Drew. I've watched it work many times. I've done it many times. I haven't seen anything bad happen. And why not give more electricity if the patient appears to need it?
Yeah, I completely agree. We've been doing this in our department for some time. I can remember the first time I did it, and there was all this fear that we were going to blow up one of our defibrillators and void all the warranties. It turns out that this has been done thousands, if not more times across the country, and there are no case reports of exploding defibrillators that I am aware of. But listeners, if you are, please let me know. The paper is Chesky's et al. This is the impact of alternative defibrillation strategies on shock refractory and recurrent ventricular fibrillation, a secondary analysis of the DOSE-VF cluster randomized controlled trial from Resuscitation 2024. We continue to bring you articles hot off the press. And just a quick reminder that this DOSE-VF trial was a large trial done out of Ontario, Canada, across multiple EMS agencies on patients who presented with out-of-hospital cardiac arrest and refractory ventricular fibrillation, that showed that dual or double sequential defibrillation is the modality of choice for converting compared to single or dual vector defibrillation, right? So there's some nuances on how different defibrillators work and how they provide electricity to the heart when you're using just one of them, but this specifically is talking about using 2. And so what did this version of the study do? It just went and reanalyzed the presenting patients and looked at a difference between both refractory as well as recurring ventricular fibrillation, and essentially came up with the same results. The primary outcome with dual or double sequential defibrillation was significantly greater than standard defibrillation. And so shock refractory, there were only about 60 patients in this, and they found that it was significantly improved. So 2 out of 24 that didn't get it, 4 out of 14 that did get this dual or double sequential defibrillation. When we're talking about V-fib, those are very significant numbers. And then recurrent V-fib, these are patients that are presenting a lot more. This makes sense. We're shocking them out, but the patient is sick. They're recurring. They're going back into that ventricular fibrillation rhythm. There were almost 300 of these patients. And then, well, not statistically different between dual sequential defibrillation versus other types of defibrillation. There were more patients who did survive to hospital discharge that were neurologically intact.
Yeah, and I would even give them one extra point here. While the confidence interval crossed 1, the trend looked pretty clear on the magnitude of recurrent cases converted, and it was not causing harm. So concur with you. Better neurologic outcome, trend towards more conversion, and it aligns with what they found in their initial study cohort.
So I applaud these authors for taking what was a good and well-designed initial study and creating a secondary analysis that actually gives us guidance on something that we are seeing more often and is going to impact patient care just as much, if not more, than what the initial study was designed for. And I think this study has the ability to give us those answers as a secondary analysis. So when you talk about secondary analysis, this is the way to do it. So clinical bottom line, double sequential defibrillation continues to gain momentum as a modality of choice for refractory V-fib, and now we can add recurrent V-fib to those indications. So when your patient continues to be in V-fib after 3 initial defibrillations with however you are defibrillating by standard defibrillator, it's reasonable to reach for a second defibrillator and try double sequential defibrillation.